you've seen footprints, you've kind of seen some of this, but really focus on how do we implement it from an ITIL perspective. So the first thing to note, and most of you probably know this, but we provide a lot of these ITIL-based templates right out of the box, so it's pretty easy to get this thing up and running. But it's not so hard-coded that you have to do it only this way. As we know, ITIL is a framework, not an exact solution, but at least your basic templates to get you started in your various processes are there right from the one. And of course, the important thing here is, version 12 of Footprints is pink verified to be ITIL compliant. So let's talk a little bit about what are the pieces, the parts, and the components that make that up. And of course, if you're not on version 12, one of the things they did to make the workflow even easier to implement and design in version 12 is now having a visual workflow drag and drop type of graphic. So it makes it kind of easy. But let's look at the modules themselves, right? So, with Footprints, you get all of the basic ITIL processes you would think about, right? Incident, problem, change, service request in your service catalog, a knowledge management system, a true CMDB, all of that is part of Footprints, along, of course, as one would expect, with very robust reporting, new analytics engine, the ability to have mobility in here, and, it's kind of ready to go, kind of out of the box. So if we kind of start looking at these things, right, so within incident management, the thing that really makes it from an ITIL perspective is if you think about the interoperability between the modules. So yes, I've got to capture all of the information about this break fix, which is what the definition of incident management is. But from an ITIL perspective, I've got to have the flexibility of aligning, attaching the CIs that might be applicable to that particular ticket that we're creating. Or I might need to link the incident to a change request or to a problem investigation, because there are all the other ITIL framework models. So having that ability to have that happen between the modules is important. And we can even do that a lot of times through an automatic process, depending on if we've created some type of business workflow that says, in the case of these values being X and Y, we should automatically put it to a problem or whatever. And then, of course, leveraging your CMDB, as we're looking into our CIs, we might want to be able to drill in to the details about what was going on there. To take that to the next logical conclusion is if you've got a recurring number of similar incidents, you would obviously like to avoid those happening in the future. So really you want to get down to figure out what's the root cause or what's the known error that's causing us to have such a high number of those incidents. And that's typically where problem management comes into play. And so as you're going through doing that, you're looking first off for workarounds that you could present to your technicians as far as, we haven't figured out exactly what's causing it, but here's a quick way to get the user back up and running, at least in a temporary fashion. But ultimately, again, we want to document that known error or root cause so that we can make a permanent fix to our environment. That's typically an infrastructure change or an application change, and maybe that then eliminates those from happening in the future. And obviously, the fewer calls you have coming to your help desk, the lower your cost of operations and being able to do that. So we certainly provide that right out of the box for you. Then, of course, you want to get your users involved doing this stuff, right? So through service request management, unlike the incident, which is typically a break fix, the service request is typically more around, hey, I need something, I want something, I need to provision something. And, that's for the end users to come in and do it. I mean, you can do service request fulfillment over the phone as well, but obviously if we go out here and empower our end users, it's going to be a lot more efficient and, again, a lower cost model for following those ITIL processes of running the service desk that you've got out there. And that's typically done through a fully functional, actionable service catalog, which is a way to just automate what happens in that service request and automatically have all the fulfillment steps already done. And of course, the analogy that most people can identify with here is to think about an onboarding of a new employee process, right? There are a number of things that have to happen to be ready for that new employee that typically will involve multiple groups within your organization. IT will have things to do, facilities will have things to do, security will have things to do. Well, we can automate those processes and have those figured out, so a hiring manager could come in through the service catalog, indicate they've got a new hire, answer some questions about that new hire, name, title, position, role within the organization, and then we could kick off the fulfillment processes automatically. And this is one of the main components that ITIL really focuses on a lot, is this actionable service catalog as we go through there. Then probably one of the most important ones to make you ITIL compliant, and oh, by the way, if you're public and you have SOX compliance and those types of things, is to be able to do change and release management, right? Again, following the best practice modules of what are we doing? Why are we doing it? What are the risks to doing it? When are we going to do it? What configuration items or assets are going to be impacted by this change based on the date and time we elected to do it? What type of approvals might we need for this particular type of change? And let's automate that approval workflows that will happen for you automatically. And then figure out, okay, we know what we're going to do. We know why we're doing it. We've decided when we're going to do it. We've gotten the approvals. Then who is actually going to go out and perform the task associated with this change? So I've got some series of multiple changes or multiple tasks that need to be done. I need to identify when do they get done and who are they going to be assigned to, either by individual technician or by network, by a team within FootPrints, the way we've got to do it. And of course, I do want to document in here, is this just a planned change and we're just going to start off with the change request? Or did this change get spurred initially by an incident? And in order to resolve the incident, we knew we had to do something to a production server. Therefore, the incident created the change request, but showed that the incident is the link that caused that. Or more typical, I've got a problem investigation that probably had a whole bunch of incidents associated with it. We finally figured out what that root cause of that known error was, and now in order to rectify that, we need to do an infrastructure change. So in that case, the problem record initiates a change record, and then we follow through with the best practice flow of that. So again, it's this interoperability between the modules that really is what is invoking the whole process of the ITIL best practices or good practices model as you go through there. Around all of those, though, you typically need to measure how well we're doing, either by type of issue, by type of customer that you may be servicing, or groups even within your own internal organization. So the ability to set up work targets for response time and resolution time and being able to keep track of all of that and measuring your staff by that, but also measuring the satisfaction that you would have with the user community you support, this is really what kind of keeps that from being just a guessing game between it, as opposed to having a true metrical way to be able to come in and manage that as far as how we're doing and getting the reports and the dashboards out of that within your organization. One of the keys, of course, around all of those processes, whether I'm in service requests or incidents or even in change requests, is to leverage the knowledge base, right? When I find that known error or root cause in problem management, I should probably create a knowledge article about here was the issue, here's how we resolved it, so if it ever comes up again, we've got references to that. So having a very interactive knowledge base for both your end users as well as your staff. And if you, like many FootPrints users, have multiple groups using FootPrints, i.e. facilities, HR, and so forth, they can each have their own knowledge management system, so that when the people in HR are looking up how to do certain things, it's not around how to fix a PC, it's around how to coordinate those new employee benefits when you have a change in your family status, such as a child or something. So you can keep it relevant to just the group that you're in. So a strong knowledge management center is a key tenet of most of the ITIL frameworks that you will see there. Then, of course, the thing that really holds all of this together, right, that ties all the records together, is the whole CMDB, or the Configuration Management Database. Because here, we not only are going to have all of their different classes of things that we want to track, obviously the IT things like desktops and servers and laptops and routers and switches, but we might track other things. We might track access requests. We might track furniture and equipment. Depends on what your organization is. We might track even locations, so that and the advantage of doing something like that is I could click on a single location and see everything that was contained within that location very, very easily by having that relationship ability within Footprints and being able to visually represent some of the upstream, downstream associations that you have within there, right? Here's my service, which is Exchange. Here are 2 application servers that we've got talking to 2 different databases and 3 web server front ends to it. Wouldn't it be nice to be able to not only see that in a matrix form, but be able to project that from a graphical standpoint for a quick understanding there. Of course, you've got to be able to, once you do all of that, you've got to have some very strong reporting. And in 12, of course, they do have a much improved analytics and reporting engine over the previous versions of Footprints that are going to give you that ability to gin up your reports, gin them up with graphics, be able to create different dashboards and so forth from that to satisfy that. And again, you're reporting against all of those ITIL modules as you do that. If you didn't know, they used to charge for mobile, but starting in version 12 of Footprints, you can now enable your technicians working on those ITIL modules to come in through their HTML5 enabled smartphone through the web browser and be able to do those things as well, and you've got some control over that. And then last but not least, we want to get feedback from our user community as to how they think we're doing. How are we perceived as the help desk people or the HR people or whatever work group you're in? How are we being perceived? And so, as you probably know, you can configure a number of different surveys that get sent out based on business rules that are looking at various and other things about it, and that's kind of how you get that continuous feedback loop of what's going on there. So let's take a quick peek over here into Footprints. Again, if you're new to version 12, this is kind of what it looks like out of the box. I'm logged in as a technician, so I have a Footprints license. And of course, I can configure to have some little interactive widgets down here that I'm interested in, but every technician can create their own thing. So I'm looking at an interactive chart here of tickets by category, it looks like. I've got some RSS feeds coming in from a site. In my case, I've got the BMC communities page for Footprints keeping me up to date. And then I've elected to see a list of global tickets going on, and I can toggle that little widget on and off. But if I'm sitting here looking at my incidents, we want to talk about then how you do those modules. So before I go into that, let's talk about how do we get the ITIL set up within here. Well, if you're an administrator, one of the things you can do is these process templates. You can kind of create the basic ITIL framework right out of the box just by coming in and saying, well, what do you want to create? Well, in this case, if we wanted to do, typical IT service management, if we select this business process set of templates out of the box, we're going to get an address book, we're going to get a CMDB created, we're going to get a knowledge base, we're going to get your service portfolio, which is your service requests and your SLAs, we're going to get a change management, and we're going to get your service desk, which is your problems and your incident tickets up there. So it'll kind of create your basic framework for you. Now, I've already done mine, so I'm not going to continue here, but that's where you do it. And then, of course, you come in, and mine, I've called mine RightStar ITSM here. And if I want to kind of, after I set mine up, if I want to kind of come out and see, well, how did I configure my system here, you can come in and get this type of a report, and it'll show you exactly how the system is set up, what are the fields you have in each one of your modules. So I've got a knowledge base, service portfolio, all of the incident, problem, and change, and then there's my corporate address book. Here are all the fields, the way they're laid out, all of the workflows, all of the reporting cycles. So all of that kind of gets done out there for you as you go through that. So once you've done that, then of course is where you're ready to kind of go in and work your ticket. So let's just go in. Of course, as most of you know, a user could submit a ticket, and I'll do that for you in a minute. A user could email in an issue, and it would automatically create a ticket. Or, as we know, the phone will still ring, and depending on what they're calling in about, I could just bring up the form as the user. So in this case, I answer the phone. I ask, "Hey, who's calling?" Say, "Hey, this is Davis." I'm going to do somebody else. This is calling in here, and all I've got to do is then make sure I can figure out from the address book who that user is. In this case, James is calling in. And having a CMDB, one of the things I can do is say, "Oh, James, are you calling in about your Windows 7 laptop?" Because if he is, I would certainly want to link that configuration item to the ticket for me automatically. So we want to give you that ability to leverage the fact that you've got that information in there. But this is where the technician would start, capturing the information about what was going on, probably getting some details from that end user as far as what was going on out there. And at that point in time, you'd ask the normal questions. "Hey, is your computer up? Can you get to the internet, intranet?" And once you've done it, you said, "Well, James, let me look into this and I will get back to you." So I would save the ticket also. Of course, it would generate the ticket number that's going to be assigned to it. And of course, it would automatically trigger the email to go out to James, acknowledging the fact that he's got a new incident registered with us for 10/7/97. So as the technician, I'd want to come in here and probably categorize it. As you guys already know, these are your category fields here. In this case, we're saying we've got an exchange problem. Again, putting in some more notes here. But once I did that, following the ITIL model, my logic would be, well, rarely does a single person have an email problem, again, assuming his PC's working and he can get to the internet and all that stuff. So my initial thinking would be, wow, I wonder if we've got a whole bunch of other tickets out there. So you typically, especially if you've been a long-time FootPrints user, you'd come down and look and say, "Hey, have any global tickets already been created? And if I do find one out there, I could just subscribe my incident to the global incident. I would become a child ticket to that incident." And of course, as most of you know, the advantages of doing it that way is when we finally resolve the global incident, it will automatically update and close all of those children incidents that are attached to it. But if you're following more of the ITIL model, what you would want to do is you'd want to look at the related records over here. And instead of going necessarily to a global incident, you'd probably want to know if we should start a problem investigation, or maybe one's already been started. So again, I could go out and look at what are my current ongoing problem investigations, and if I had one for email, again, I could just link right to it from here. If I didn't see one out there, then your other option would be to say, "Hey, we need to figure out what's going on here. Create a problem record, show my incident is the one that created the problem record, and broadcast a message to all of the other technicians that we've now opened up a problem investigation as to what was going on." The other scenario that we talked about is, let's say that I'm a pretty good frontline tech, and after engaging in some conversations with my level 2, level 3 techs, we determined that the reason James and anybody else who calls in now, the reason they're having a problem with the email is we're missing a critical patch somewhere on our Exchange server. So depending on your processes, I think you would find it normally the way people would do it would say, well, anytime you're going to patch a production server, you're going to go through formal change management. So again, in my incident ticket, I would want to give the option to link my incident to that change, or again, if no change had already been created, this is the first set of users complaining about this, I would want to go out and create a change request, show that the change request was caused by us working on this initial issue that James had it here. And again, this is the whole key to why I went through that first thing. It's that ability to, from within any ticket, to link to any other one of the ITIL modules. So incident to incident, incident to problem records, incident to a change record. A problem could go to a change, and from a change you could actually go back to an incident if we found that it caused that. So having that ability to come in and do that type of thing becomes critically important there. Then the other thing, if you think about it, is remember in this case, we went on and linked that Windows 7 laptop that that this particular user have. If you do that, and if you've got that information into the system, as most of you know, depending on where you do it, you have some options here of doing things. If you've got some of the BMC client management add-on module, you've got the ability right here from within the ticket to come in here and do things like see how it's configured, see what software is installed, view the file system, view the registry, take over remote control. So just know those types of things are all part of leveraging what's going on there. And then I'm not going to go through the attachments and the time spent. I think most of you guys and gals already know how FootPrints works from that perspective. But of course, what you do want to do, and not everybody is doing this, but as you go through and do it, at some point in time, you're going to want to put in that I have now resolved this issue out, put in the details as to what is the resolution that we did. And once you do that, that again would spur an email to the user, in this case James, that we've now resolved your issue and you shouldn't be having that problem anymore. But as importantly, that user would have a link in that notification email to please take our survey and give us some feedback on how we're doing, which is all part of that continuous feedback resolution stream that you kind of want to be doing there. There's where it went out and acknowledges that fact it was out there. So that kind of gives you an idea of how you would typically work within the incident queue. So let's go in and kind of look at we'll look at a pre-formatted service request. And again, this could be done from the end user perspective, or it could be done by the technician calling in. So in this case, again, trying to follow the model, a hiring manager calls in and says, hey, I've got a new employee I'm going to bring on in a couple of weeks. I need you to kick off our new employee process form. Well, again, since that's a pre-formed template, the only thing the technician would have to do is go say, okay, we want to kick off a new hire process. You would then say, well, what's going to be the name of that new hire? And I'll just make it my son here is going to be it. And as soon as I do that and I save that off, that will then start to invoke whatever our workflow process was, right? So it says, okay, this is obviously an onboarding type of ticket. The current status is pending approval, because remember, this is the way we've designed this up front to work. So an email approval notification goes out. There's also an approval method right within the ticket. If I do approve the ticket within here or via the email, it then kicks off all of the information about it. So it changes the status now to where we're in full onboarding here, where it was in the pending approval state. We've now come into where we've got the ticket open and we're going to be working on it. And now, of course, is where, since I have done this via a preformed template here, I can come in here, so I scroll down here, and be able to see that we kicked off a number of things to happen on behalf of that new employee coming on board. We're going to have somebody create the Active Directory account. We're going to have somebody else issue badges and keys to get in. We're going to provide access to a couple of different systems out there. So using the service catalog allows us to kind of automate those processes within here, including invoking the approval processes that we might need to do. So another one that we talked about that's very important is the change process. So I'm going to leverage my search ability within FootPrints here. And I'm just going to say, hey, I want to go out there and I want to look up a change request that I've already got out there. And I'm looking at one that's got the word Houston in here because I know I've got a good example of that where we were going to upgrade our Houston network. So I kind of wanted to walk you through, again, what we're trying to capture in a change request, right? So this could have been caused, of course, originally from an incident or from a problem investigation, or it could have just been a standalone change that we knew we wanted to do it as part of our ongoing maintenance and improvement techniques. So this was where we were going to upgrade our Houston network. This was designated as a standard type of change, and that's an important field because we normally use this field and maybe a combination of other fields to determine what workflow approval process that we want to invoke, because obviously you might have different approvals depending on whether it's a standard change, an emergency change, a maintenance change, whatever the case may be. This one's currently has been accepted. We've assigned some urgency and impacts to that information there. We've categorized it that this is going to be a network change that we're doing and put in the subcategories. Why are you doing the change? And again, these are your values, but I picked customer dissatisfaction with the network here. We went out and picked a time when we wanted to do that, and of course we did that by leveraging our list of the upcoming changes to pick a date and time that would actually be appropriate there. Then, of course, we went out here and we said, well, what configuration items are going to be impacted by this change? So, I went out and grabbed my switch and my 2 routers that were going to be impacted by this one. Again, just by going out to my CMDB, finding the devices that I needed. We'll just go out and grab one extra device here just to show you that. Link that to the changes well out there. Then I have to determine, this one's already been submitted for approval, but the approval would be next. Then you're going to say, well, who's going to actually, we know what we're doing, why we're doing it, when we're doing it, what we're doing it to. Now who's going to actually go out and work on the tickets? So I had 3 different tasks that I assigned here. And again, I could just right-click here, say I want to create step number 4 if I wanted to. But I said, okay, somebody's got to back up the system, somebody's got to work on the switch, and I got a different team doing the router replacement. So this is that ability to have cascading related tasks to whatever the change is that you've got going on out there. And of course, along the way, everything's getting written into the history file. You're tracking all your times, all of those normal things you're seeing out there. But that's where you're capturing it. And because you've got this level of details, that's where if somebody comes in from an audit perspective and wants to know, who approved this change, who worked on the change, who created the change, all of that is captured here within the record. All of that can be rolled up into a report or a dashboard. Obviously, when you have your weekly or monthly, often you have your CAB meeting, looking in and approving those upcoming changes, all of this could be put into a nice report or a dashboard for all the members of that change group to have that, to then come in and make those decisions as you are kind of going through this thing as far as what you want to do. So I don't want to ignore the fact I've kind of done everything as the agent, but of course keep in mind that the end user community could come in here and submit it themselves. This is where the end user community could come in and leverage the catalog, right? And again, you could break that out. Here I'm simulating that the nice thing about having it is this one service portal could be a front end for various different groups within your organization. So I've got a training department, a facilities group, an HR group, a service desk group, but it's a one-stop shop for the end user community to be able to come in and, again, put in just tickets, put in things from a service request perspective. And since some of you may not be on the latest release of FootPrints, they've added something new that a lot of users had done. So here I'm logged in as Joshua Davis, and I'm seeing only my tickets. But we had a lot of requests from a number of our users that sometimes we want to be able to see all tickets for like a location, right? And we see this a lot of times in our retail customers that, hey, we need to be able to see all the tickets for store 27 regardless of who put it in. Well, we created this new functionality in the latest version, allows you to put up a combination view. So since in this case, Ashley Miller and Joshua Davis both have a common location, that's the field I used here. So now I can look at all tickets by location regardless of who put it in. So that's a nice kind of new feature that they've added in the latest version of FootPrints Service Core that we have in there. Again, most of you have probably seen this, but of course, if you don't already have your CMDB configured, I think you can start to see how, especially in change management and even incident management, it becomes a critical way of doing it. And again, any type of things that you want to track, you can do. And of course, you can have multiple CMDBs as well, right? The facilities group probably only wants to see things related to, their stuff, plumbing, HVAC, so forth. They don't care about IT assets. but the IT department doesn't want to see air conditioning and boiler equipment. So you can have multiple ones, and then, you know, different types of things you might want to track, you've got that ability to do. And again, the whole purpose of a CMDB is to give you those linkages, right? So if I pull up, for example, this little router that I've got here, it's a network device. I want to know the basic information about what we're tracking about that device. It's got a name, it's got an asset tag, it's currently deployed. I know the manufacturer, I know the model number, I know the serial number. I can track whatever levels of cost. In this case, this was the invoice number we purchased it under. Here was the purchase order number, paid $600 for it. When did we put it into service? Did we have a warranty cost associated with it? Did we have a lease term associated with it? Then I want to know, well, who is the person responsible for this device? So from my address book, you want to link the user that's associated with the device. And then I want to automatically see the ticket history. So as this asset or this CI gets attached to incidences or changes or service requests, it will automatically create this link. So it looks like in this case, we've had one request for change where this network router was attached to that in there. And if I want to kind of see the information about it, I can see that it hangs off of a Cisco switch. And so what hangs off of the router are these two devices right here. So giving you that type of detailed insight into your CMDB lets you not only associate the CIs with the tickets, but then gives you the ability to kind of follow what is the history of that asset. You know, is it time for a replacement of this? We've had, 20 incidents in the past 3 months. When did we buy it, right? I might want to track that financial information and then run a report, show me all laptops that were put into service in 2016, because now into 18 we're hitting that second year anniversary. Or again, whatever the metrics was there, you're kind of able to do that as you go through there. It brings up one other one that I don't think everybody is aware of in that type of reporting, is this advanced search criteria that we have here that lets you kind of do some math around the types of searches that you wanted to do here. So I'll just use my initials over here, and then it says, well, what do you want to search in? So all of your different workspaces and containers, you could pick multiple ones, or you could just come in here and say, hey, right now I'm only worried about looking at incidents, but I could look at incidents, and I could look at service requests, whatever I might need to do. But this is where the real power of this comes in, is to be able to go out there and add conditions to my search, including these time-based factors. If I want to run a report and I only want to look at incidents for the past week or the past 30 days, that logic is already built into here. So I want to look at incidents that we created in the last 30 days. So I don't care anything about the hours and the minutes. So that's condition number one. So that's my first create. Now I want to add another one, and maybe I'm then looking at different things. I want to only know in here, I want to get one where we've got a category that's equal to, just pick one of these. I know I've done a lot of enterprise applications. So maybe that's my second criteria that I want to look at there, right? So as many of these, including these age-based calculations, can be done there. And then you would pick, well, what are the fields? Think of this is really a report generation almost. What are the fields that you want to see? Well, I want to know who the assignee was. I want to know what the description of the issue was. I want to know what the current status of it is. And again, just going down, creating the various ones. What was that category that we used on it? Again, scrolling on down, just finding these. I probably want to know the first name and the last name of the person associated with the ticket. So there was my first name, then we'll grab the last name, and get those out there. And then you've got an ability out here of seeing, well, what would the report look like if you did that? So this kind of gives you an ability to kind of go over into there and get some of those things that you are looking at. And once I have this in a saved search view here, when I'm up in my analytics and creating the report, I can say, hey, overlay this filter to it, because I want to have this date time range already done in my report. So I can just say, run my report. Here's the way I want the report laid out, but pull in this metric in here that I've got I've got in there about that particular one that we've got there. So if I do that, then you can set when do you want to do it. I think I didn't have that second condition on there. Bring out your results there. So hopefully that gives you some insight. Again, you've got your automatic reports out here. You've got all the reports around your ticket statuses. Did we resolve things? How long did it stay in a waiting approval versus pending customer? So turnaround by status. You've got the ability to obviously track all the various times your community has spent doing that. You've got the ability, of course, to come in and once I've created reports, to come in and get my dashboard. So let's look at that survey dashboard, for example. How are we doing? And so once I do that, I can have a report that brings in all the details about the feedback we got from those surveys coming in, and then have it create the various dashboards view based on, well, what are the questions that we're asking in there and how are we doing? And of course, you can modify any of these dashboards as you see fit here just by bringing in those additional widgets there. So hopefully that has given you some insight into, basically leveraging incident, problem, change, service levels, surveys, leveraging the CMDB, and having that interoperability between the groups is kind of what gives you the ability to implement footprints in an ITIL-centric fashion without it, being so hard-coded that it makes it not usable by the group. So with that, Valerie, Dick, are there any questions in the queue?
Well, thanks a lot, Roger. Great job. By the way, who says Agile or ITIL is not Agile? You got through it in about 35 minutes. Just soup to nuts. So good job. Now would be a good time to ask a question. There's a Q&A box, and if you wanted to, you could fill out a question or two, and Roger will be happy to get to it. But let me start off, Roger, with a couple of things here. What happens to some of our customers is that they'll go ahead, they'll make the investment in the software, and maybe they'll do the implementation, just sort of a quick out-of-the-box implementation, thinking that they'll get the rest of it completed at a later date. And that later date never comes because there's just too much going on, right? And right. You can make a case that lots of companies will buy a piece of software and then only use about 10% of its capability. And now with the whole concept of IT modernization, what's happening is a lot of companies saying, hey, we got to get rid of this legacy software that we have. Let's move to the cloud, or let's do something else. And so those pieces of software that really haven't done much, that really haven't maybe been implemented properly, would be easy targets. So that's not really the way it's supposed to work. I mean, you really shouldn't ever have to modernize, because you should always be up to date. Right, absolutely. So that's why you've done such a nice job of laying out kind of what you should be doing. So I guess the question that I have is, what would you do? If you had to decide, well, what are really the top maybe 3 modules that I should implement, and then after you do those top 3, what would be a couple more that you'd want to get out of their way? Then.
Well, I think most folks, of course, have got to have a way to handle their incidents as their first priority, because that's what's obviously impeding people from doing their work. So incidents are going to typically be first, and along with incidents, you certainly want to be able to handle those requests. So incidents and service requests are typically your 2 modules there. And typically, along with that, of course, is the self-service portal is there, the ability for the end users to submit their tickets around those incidents and those service requests. Then I think it's important at that point to make sure you've got your CMDB implemented, so you can start to understand where CIs are impacted by those incidents and by those service requests that you've got out there. Because I might request a new tablet PC. Well, when I get that new tablet PC, it needs to go into the CMDB so we can then start to track the history of it. So I think they're your first 2. Then I think the one that typically should come after that is, now that I've gotten those assets in there, now I've got all the effective tools I need to be able to do smart change management. Now, especially, of course, if you are subject to audits or SOX compliance or something like that, that you've got to be able to, from a documentary standpoint, show all the things we talked about. What did you do? Why did we do it? Who approved it? What was the impact of it? Could you easily roll it back? What were the analysis? So I think that kind of comes third, but it's kind of senseless to do change management, I think, if you don't have your CMDB implemented first. And then, somewhere along the lines there, if you can create good knowledge articles, it can certainly cut down on the number of tickets you get to the help desk. Now, I'll be honest with you, a lot of customers say today, well, why do I want to go create knowledge articles when people can just go out and Google it? And to a certain extent, I agree with that. I mean, that's what I do, right? I go out and Google it. But you're going to obviously have some things that are specific to your business, your homegrown applications that you're not going to necessarily be able to Google. So even if it's a limited subset for things that you would want to empower, not only empower your end users, but also maybe are things that you want to make from a documentary standpoint for your staff, like, hey, if this issue comes up, let's make sure we always ask these 5 questions or we gather these 5 statistics. Well, that needs to be documented somewhere, and then a self-service and a knowledge article is a great way to do that.
Yeah, excellent point.
Yep.
I mentioned modernization, and one thing that a lot of companies are doing is trying to move to the cloud, and so they're reaching out to Amazon or to Azure, and now all of a sudden the next thing you know, they're saying, okay, well now what do we do? Well, they may say, well, we got this one application, it's called FootPrints, let's put it on the cloud. Do you know, can somebody run FootPrints on Amazon? Do you know if that's possible?
I mean, if you basically lease a server space and disk space and all that from Amazon, you can put whatever application you've got on it. It doesn't have to be on premise on your server. It could be on a server in Amazon's cloud just as easily.
Right. Yeah. So that would be the way to do it. We also offer our own hosting. We use Rackspace. And certainly possible. We have customers that have said, hey, we don't want to fool around with servers and software and everything else. And so RightStar stepped up and said, okay, we can do that. And it's not just FootPrints, but it's also the service management product. It's also the BCM, or the client management product as well. And that works out really well. And there's just much less hassle. And you don't have to worry about how do I install this and what should I do, and do we have enough bandwidth or enough horsepower to make this thing work.
Yeah, and not only that, but RightStar offers a remote administration. So, you've washed your hands of the servers and the databases and the storage and all of that. Well, if you also want to just have somebody on a periodic basis come in and do some of your administrative work on your FootPrint system, we can do that on a remote basis as well, and you can focus on the other parts of your business. Yeah,
and we have a company that we've been working with and sort of in that capacity called Treehouse. And they're a big outfit. And they're using, I think they have somewhere in the neighborhood of about 500 seats of FootPrints. And they've rolled this out to all kinds of non-IT applications and doing some case management. And it's really working well for them. And you don't have to spend an arm and a leg either, because oftentimes, in everybody's hurry to get to the cloud, they don't realize how expensive it is. But you're typically charged when you go to the cloud. You're charged, per user. Maybe it's concurrent. Maybe it's in fact it probably wouldn't be concurrent. It would probably be per user. And if you have a significant number of users, you can be paying a lot of money to go to the cloud on some of the SaaS-based offerings that are out there. So while we're on this subject, make sure the community out there knows that BMC also has a product to help you model what would be the cost benefit of running in the cloud versus running on-premise as you're doing. Right. And you can actually model either in Azure or the Amazon cloud what it would be like to put it there and see what the cost would be and compare on-prem versus in the cloud. And so if that's something anybody's interested in, give us a call and we can discuss that in further detail with you. Yeah, that's a good point, because that can get out of control. Another question that came in here is about integrations, and I guess could you talk a little bit about because everybody is going to want to integrate. Maybe it's Splunk, or maybe it's some other performance management or network management service that's out there. Mm-hmm. How would you do that with FootPrints?
Well, I mean, the typically what happens with these monitoring solutions and all of that, the simplest way to do it is obviously the best. And as long as we can open up a ticket or update a ticket from an incoming email, if that system can just shoot us an email, we'll take the appropriate action on it. You can also leverage, of course, the SOAP-based API capability within FootPrints to kind of automate that, make that more of a interactive type process. And then, of course, FootPrints has always had something out there called Dynamic SQL, which allows you to go out and interactively look up things and pull information from other systems in real time through a business rule back into FootPrints. So that's out there. So between email, between Dynamic SQL, and between the SOAP-based APIs, we've generally been able to do that, as well as, of course, you can always just write the scripts, but typically you don't have to do that as much as you did in the past.
Right, and it just kind of, when you were talking, it kind of reminds me, we've been working with an organization called National Vision, and they use FootPrints in a big way. They have about, I think they're up to close to 1,000 stores now nationwide, and they have an ERP system like most big companies do, and they use that ERP system because it tracks the number of products that they sell, and they've linked that up now to FootPrints, so that if somebody calls in about a particular issue regarding a purchase that they made, rather than having to swivel chair and look that up in another system, it's all right there in FootPrints form. So I thought that was kind of slick how that worked. Okay. And then the other thing that I liked is all the different non-IT examples that you gave as well, and I certainly like the look and feel of that, and I think that's where you're going to start to get some real value. And of course, you're getting a little bit outside of ITIL there, but why not? Why not use FootPrints as a platform and take advantage of that and sort of consolidate other applications that might be out there in the environment.
And if you really want to use that CMDB, I think most of you have probably heard before, if you really get into that and you're going to be doing a lot of receiving and a lot of moving of assets around, keep in mind that RightStar does provide a barcode scanning automation tool to work within the CMDB and FootPrint. So if that's something that would make your life easier, we can discuss that with you as well.
Okay. Right. Well, I think that's about it, Roger. Thank you very much. Again, we got through ITIL in a very agile fashion, so I appreciate your time there. I don't know, was there another slide that you can kind of
just one last slide that we have there, that if you need to contact us, here's our contact information. I think most of you probably got that. There's also information, of course, in the invite you accepted to come to this, but we'd be more than happy to do it. And this recording will be available out there for you as well if you have somebody.
If you can display that slide.
I should. Oh, did I not do that? Hold on.
Right. That would be a little
share.
bit better. Yep.
My screen. And there's
there you go.
The slide. There you go.
Okay. All right. Well, thanks again, Rod.